This is Corey Smith with MyFirstDrone.com, and today we're going to be installing the Immersion RC 5.8 GHz 600 milliwatt video transmitter for the Phantom 2 version 2. So before we get started, you're going to need some double-sided mounting tape, a soldering sponge, soldering paste, 60/40 solder, a small precision knife, heat shrink tubing, wire cutters, a soldering iron, and a lighter. So the first thing that we need to do is take the video transmitter out of the box. Once it's out of the box and we know that everything is here, you're going to take the biggest cable with all the wires on it, and the only wire that we need is the one in the center. The yellow wire is for taking the video signal from the GoPro, sending it through the video transmitter, and then over to your receiver. To get the wires out, all you have to do is take a small knife or a needle and then push on the little metal tabs, and the wire should come right out. And obviously when you're doing this, you need to be really careful since you're dealing with a really sharp knife right next to your fingers. Once we're done doing that, we're going to take our video wire as well as our power and ground wires and cut that to about 2.5 inches. The reason why you want to leave these wires relatively long is because if you make a mistake, then you can always just cut off the solder joint and try again. So now we're going to take a knife and cut off the insulation so that we can solder the wires. If you already have wire strippers laying around, then you can also use those and that'll be a lot faster. If you flip the Phantom 2 over, you'll notice that there's 4 colorful wires on the bottom, and that's what you're going to be soldering the video transmitter to. If you can't find them, then they're probably hiding under your Zenmuse cable. There's a yellow wire for video, a red wire for power, and then 2 brown wires for ground. Although we're not going to be using the brown wire that's next to the video cable, we are going to be using it in a later video, so make sure that you keep it safe. So before we go any further, you need to make sure that your Phantom Smart battery is either out of your Phantom completely or at least turned off. Once you've made sure that there's no power going through the Phantom wires, you can then remove the insulation and then start dipping all the wires in soldering paste or soldering flux. You can kind of think of flux as like lubricant that helps the solder flow onto the wires properly. So now we're going to cut the heat shrink into 3 separate pieces and then slip it over the 3 wires. You want to make sure that it stays as far away from the solder joint as possible, otherwise it'll shrink too soon. The next step is to turn the soldering iron on and heat it anywhere from 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I personally had it set to about 525 degrees, but it was still a little bit too hot for the wires. So before using the soldering iron, it's always a good idea to clean off the tip by applying some solder to it and then wiping it with a wet sponge first. And then before we actually start soldering the wires together, we need to tin them just by putting some solder on all of the wires. Now you'll notice that the insulation on the wires does tend to shrink a little bit, especially if your soldering iron is too hot, but that's completely fine as long as you have enough heat shrink to go over it. Once there's solder on all of the wires, now you can actually start forming the wires together, and this is really a simple process because since there's already solder on the wires, it naturally wants to form together. So really you just need to make sure that you're heating up both of the wires at the same time, and then once you get it how you want it, just hold the wires there for about 5 seconds so the solder can cool down. After you're done soldering, make sure that you clean your soldering iron off, make sure that it's actually turned off, and then make sure that it's in a safe place so you don't burn yourself. And then you can go ahead and slide the heat shrink onto the soldering joints so that you can then shrink them. While you're doing this, be really careful not to burn the Phantom or the Zenmuse gimbal cable. It helps a lot if you move the lighter back and forth really fast, that way the heat gets distributed properly. So now the only thing left to do is plug the video transmitter back in and then mount it on the Phantom however you want. I recommend that you mount it on the right side, that way it's far away from the compass and it won't get in the way of the battery. Once you've mounted the video transmitter, you're officially done with the installation. You can go out and fly, or you can wait until the next video where I'll be showing you what you can do with that last wire. But for now, this is Corey Smith with MyFirstDrone.com, and I will see you in another video.